Hey garden friends, wouldn't you like a flower garden that returns year after year with little or no money outlay on your part? Stay tuned. We're going to talk about flowers that you can grow from seed, as well as they will reseed themselves in your garden for years to come. Don't hate me if some of these get out of control. So let's talk about 20 plus flowers that you can grow from seed, whether sowing outside in the fall or right now I'm in December here. You can grow indoors on, like I have a seed rack, or in here in the greenhouse, or winter sowing, all of the above. And then in years to come, these will readily reseed in your garden if done right. And I'll tell you all about that too at the end. Tell you how you can get the most bang for your buck. Okay, so number one, I've got my list here so I don't forget any. Bachelor buttons. Bachelor buttons come in the most beautiful blue flower. And they also come in other colors, but the blue is what they're well known for. They make a great cut flower. They're easy to start from seed. They are one of the considered a cool flower, meaning they like cooler temperatures to germinate and start growing. So that is something I could throw out of my garden right now, the seeds, and they would come up in spring. And they may work for you too. There's a great book out. It's called About Growing Cool Flowers. I will link it below in the description box. And it kind of gives you an idea of when you can sow these seeds and have them germinate and grow for you very, very easily. But bachelor buttons, beautiful, as I said, great cut flower. Calendula. Now, calendula are known for, I have a garden friend and she makes cosmetic products with the calendula. And they're beautiful. They're used in dyes, etc. But they will also grow in the valley. Calendula grow and bloom through the winter, whereas here they do go dormant, but they are a beautiful flower that will reseed themselves readily. Mine grow relatively closer to the ground. They're a shorter growing flower, but beautiful creamy colors, oranges and yellows. I don't think they come in any other colors than that. Cosmos. Cosmos are wonderful. Now, I know they will reseed themselves. They have in my garden. A lot of seeds have to fall for them to come up readily. There is a motel uptown from me, and they have a front flower bed, and all they do is they have just masses of cosmos that come up. They're in the pinks and whites and the standard cosmos, and they just let them go to seed every fall, and then they come up again the following spring and bloom all summer long. They are a beautiful display. It's easy for them because they just come on up. So cosmos are another beautiful flower, as well as they come in different heights, different colors. There's the orange and yellow ones. I'll link to those. Those ones are really prolific in reseeding themselves. And then some people call them kind of a thug because they reseed so readily. But if you have tougher conditions, this might be something you want to try to get to come back every year. Only thing with the ones that I have grown is the deer love them. So make sure you plant them in an area that's protected or give them a good spray with deer repellent. Larkspur. Larkspur reseed themselves like crazy in my garden. I am yanking them up like weeds in the springtime in areas that they've reseeded that I don't want them. But because I have so many in areas that I do like them, I don't worry about pulling up the ones that are in areas that I don't want them and just yank them up. I do transplant some. They say they don't like to be transplanted, but the way I do it, where I dig down really deep when they're small and pick up the whole mass of dirt and transplant that whole mass into another area, and they do transplant just fine for me. I just make sure there's little to no root disturbance when I do that, because they really basically don't know they've been moved. So larkspur, beautiful. It also comes in pinks. I've had them cross-pollinate where they're splotchy or streaked with pink and lavender. I don't know if I can find a picture of the ones I've had like that, but I will put it up if I can find it. So larkspur, put that one on your list for sure. Nigella. Nigella. It's also called Love in a Mist, and there's quite a few colors of that. There's one that is like a black and white that I had grown, and yeah, it is another one of those, I think, cool flowers that you can sow early in the season or in the fall like I do, and then they'll come up in the spring and do just beautifully for you. Yeah, that's another ephemeral flower that is just super easy to grow, and it fills in nicely and gives you that lush cottage garden look. And the frilly, lacy foliage is just as enchanting too. Poppies. Now, I shared a video last year of me sowing my poppy seeds in the snow, and you can. Poppies. I've sown oriental poppies. I've sown Shirley poppies. I've the Hungarian blue poppies. All of these I have sown. Is it the Hungarian blue? I think it's the Hungarian blue. Yeah. And these ones that were really lacy and gorgeous last summer. And all I did was throw them out in the snow. December, January, February, whatever month that I decided to do it. I planted them this year much earlier. Here in the fall, it's cooled down, so I planted them out sooner, which you can do that as well. But not only do they grow beautifully, being sown so easily, but they reseed themselves. Now, I let the seed pods form, dry out, I cut them, and then I spread them where I want them. If not, just leave them where they're at and they'll spread there. But usually I want to spread more around because they come up real thick when you leave the seed pods, because there's so many of them. There's a million seed pods or seeds in the one spot. So spread the love around. The poppies do bloom early for me in the season, and then I will deadhead them, and I can get more. But usually I'm ready for something else to come up in that area, so I'll just go ahead and cut them back down to the ground after I've let the seed pods form. So of the ones that I want to save, I don't let everyone form seeds because I don't need that many seeds. So, and then as I said, I want to plant something else in that spot. Therefore, I will then pull those plants or just cut them off the ground and then plant whatever else I want around them, and they take over. Sweet alyssum. I don't know if this is reseeded for you, but this year I had a whole pathway lined with the white sweet alyssum that came back from last year, and I just had let it seed. Like, the sweet alyssum's still out there. We've had a couple frosts. Some of it's still blooming. A lot of it's going dormant and or dying. But underneath of it is the seeds that it's put out, and come next spring they'll start coming up and filling in and doing just beautifully. In fact, I will transplant much of it, because it's so thick, to other areas of the garden where I want it. Or if I didn't want more elsewhere, I would pot it up and give it away. Pretty tough plants, the sweet alyssum, and the pollinators love them. So, sweet alyssum on your list. Now, snapdragons, for me, have turned out to be perennial. They're usually treated as annuals, but I'm zone 8B, so I guess that they will be perennial for me. But yeah, sowing the seeds, again, in the fall for me, because that's when they normally go to seed, and I let them come up in the spring and do beautifully. I did not know until this last year that they get 4 feet tall, or at least mine do. I'm sure they're shorter growing ones, and I'll investigate those, but they're another one of those cool flowers, I think listed in that book that I mentioned, that you can start very early in the season and get a beautiful crop come spring. I've been sowing the seeds now. This is the end of November, beginning of December. This is actually beginning of December. Normally, I don't have bare ground, a lot of it this time of year. I can have a lot of snow, but this year it's been gorgeous. It has been 60-something degrees today. I do have my heater going out here, but I don't have to have it. I just wanted to be more comfortable as the sun's going down. But yeah, so put snapdragons on your list. You can buy them at the garden center in 6-packs and see if they reseed for you, or if they don't go to seed. I had mine, which they say they only bloom in spring. When I deadheaded mine, they just kept blooming all summer long. They ended up being an all summer flower for me. And the ones that I bought at the garden center and put out, they did stay shorter. The other ones that I started from seed or let go to seed, they ended up being much taller. So we'll see what happens, and I'll show you this coming spring for the ones that I sowed directly in this fall. And we'll see. They were an orange, which I hope they do turn out orange. I bought some at the garden center that was supposed to be orange, and they're not very orange. They're yellow, and it wasn't the color I was going for. But I didn't have the heart to kill them. They're in a container. So snapdragons is another one that you will reseed itself for most people. Cleome or spider flower. I absolutely loved Cleome. Now, some people tend to say they could be a bully because they really reseed themselves. For many people, I haven't had them become a bully. In fact, the one year that I had them really thick, that winter we had it's one of the biggest snows we've ever had in a long winter, and they did not come back. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't have in a normal winter. That was very odd. A lot of things did not come back that year because of the 9 feet of snow we got on the ground. So yeah, Cleome, give it a try and tell me how it works out for you. But Cleome is another self-seeder that is just beautiful. And I love, it comes in white, and there's a dark, like a burgundy pink, and then a lighter lavender pink. Yeah, just a fun one. There's some that are shorter, some that are taller. Yeah, so there's one variety for everybody. So marigolds, did you know marigolds will reseed themselves if you let them? Mine did not go to seed this year because I kept cutting them back to keep them blooming. And I was feeding the flower heads to my chickens because marigold flowers will make your egg yolks extra dark and thick. And there's a element in the marigolds that does that. And so I didn't get seeds. So I easily seed them, direct sow them in the ground. Sometimes I start them in here if I want an early start, but they will grow beautifully from seed and they will reseed themselves readily for many people. Sunflowers, the common sunflowers, Helianthus anus, ananas. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but around here you will see them along the roadside. And they look like sunflowers, but they have all these sprays of flowers all over them, and the flowers are probably about this big, at least the ones I have seen. And I have a neighbor that lives up the road from me. He collected some seeds from the roadside, threw them in his garden, and they come back for him every single year. And he's at a higher elevation, so it's colder. And yeah, beautiful repeat bloomer every single year with little to no effort on his part. He just lets the seeds drop to the ground, or he collects them and spreads them in other areas that he wants these sunflowers to grow for him. And they get pretty tall. They can get up to 6 feet tall. Have you ever grown 4 o'clocks? Yes, these are gorgeous. 4 o'clocks are another beautiful one, and they will readily reseed for most people. They open up in the afternoon, the late afternoon, and that's why they're called 4 o'clocks. But a wide array of colors, a beautiful cottage flower, and it's just something, if you haven't tried it before, go ahead and give it a try. A package of seeds. You could even find the 4 o'clocks at dollar stores when they have the dollar packages of seeds, and give them a whirl. Just direct sow them in spring and enjoy. Have you ever heard of balsam impatiens? I hadn't for a long time, and a few years ago, they're also called touch-me-not. I had grown some, and they are gorgeous. And why they're called touch-me-nots is the seed pods, when they form, you go to touch them and they just spray. I mean, they just spray the seeds everywhere, but they do return and they are beautiful. And they enjoy partial shade. So it's a perfect one to add if you need some partial shade color. And they really are very different, but beautiful to grow. You can find the seeds readily, and do give them a try. I direct sow mine if I don't see them coming back for whatever reason. And this next year, I don't think mine will come back because the chickens were over there the other day and dug everything up in that flower bed. So I don't know. It may have disturbed it too much or buried them too deep, and I won't get them to come back. But do try some balsam impatiens. So black-eyed Susans. You've seen my garden with the black-eyed Susans growing thickly, and yes, they come back readily, but I let the seeds fall or I collect seeds. They've cross-pollinated, so I have different colors. I have some that are just pure yellow. I have some that have an amber color to them, a rust color. And there's one particularly that I bought a few years back. It's just really gorgeous, and it's called Cappuccino. So if you can find that one, do grow it. Indian Summer is a favorite. That's one of the pure yellow ones, but the form of that is just gorgeous. And some of the flowers are as big as your hand, but they will readily reseed, and they bloom midsummer on through fall. So they are a really beautiful perennial in my garden, but also a heavy reseeder. Columbine. Columbine, really, to me, they're almost weedy. They reseed so much, but they're super easy to dig up. They're a perennial for me. The blue ones I had last year were just so gorgeous. I've seen some, they're called petticoats. It's a petticoats variety, very ruffly. It's almost like somebody took whipping cream and just sprayed it in a nice little wave. And they're just ruffly and beautiful and very delicate cottage, just fluffy looking flower. So yes, do give Columbine a try. Now, if any of these flowers get out of control in your garden, it's not my fault, really. But if you're really looking for an easy way to garden, then at the end, I'll go ahead and tell you how you can keep these under control so they don't get too far out of hand. Coreopsis, or tick seed. Now, there's many varieties of tick seed as well. You can get shorter ones. I have the generic old-fashioned one, and it will reseed. It also comes back every single year. Thickly, I deadhead it all summer long, and it just keeps blooming. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's doubles. There's some that have red splotches in the middle. There's just a lot of Coreopsis that you can get, and they are well worth the effort. And I should say little effort to grow. It's an effort to keep them in check. So do know that. So let's talk about forget-me-nots. Now, some people consider them a bully, coming up in areas they don't want too readily. Now, if that happens to you, don't grow them. I've not had any issue with it. I've grown both the Chinese forget-me-nots that bloom a little bit later into the summer. I've grown the regular forget-me-nots in an area in front of my house that they stayed put. They just stayed right there. I didn't find them anywhere else in the garden. In fact, I had to transplant some, but they always reseeded right where they were at and came back year after year. This year I seeded a lot more in another area because I wanted those to grow and be a beautiful spring introduction, because they bloom before many other things do in my garden. But again, at the end, I'll tell you how to kind of keep control of these flowers that can reseed too readily for you. Hollyhocks. Now, I was reading or seeing a Pinterest post about 31 flowers never to grow in your garden. And they said hollyhocks. And that was because of them reseeding so readily. Now, they do reseed, come up and grow beautifully, but again, it's not really that hard to keep control of them. I've not had any trouble, but mine have cross-pollinated, so I've now got many, many colors, and they're just tall and stately. You do need to stake them or give them support if you have windy conditions, but hollyhocks are really a great cottage flower for your garden that will reseed themselves, and mine have proven to be perennial. I don't know if it's because of my climate or what have you, but I have the same ones coming up in the same spot year after year. Do note, the gophers love them. I've had them take out entire patches of my hollyhocks. So now that I've got the gophers semi-controlled, I will just direct sow now in other areas of the garden that I want the hollyhocks to come up, but they will reseed readily. Verbena bonariensis. This is one that now I have read that the regular Verbena bonariensis has been considered invasive in California. I've grown it for a few years. It does come up right around where it has grown from seeds, and it does return year after year as a perennial, but I haven't had it come up anywhere else in the garden yet. Now I've been trying to grow like the lollipop. It stays much shorter. I had it one year. It did not reseed well. And that could be the attribute of it being a hybrid, that it won't reseed as readily. I've been trying to get my hands on some more seeds to start because I like the shorter attribute of it. But yeah, I think it won't reseed as bully-ish as the regular ones, but I've really had no trouble in just hoeing it down when it came up, when I had too many in the area where they were coming up, and I didn't want to put it anywhere else. So Verbena bonariensis. Pollinator magnet, that's another one that the pollinators go for, especially the butterflies, like crazy. Gaillardia, yeah, I have the Arizona Sun mix. Beautiful. They're in my front entrance garden. I just spread the seeds over in the artist garden because I wanted the blue and the orange in that garden. The Gaillardias do stay shorter growing for me in that area. And yeah, they just reseed. Now the seed pods, they're really prickly. So if you want to like collect seed pods from them to spread in other areas, wear gloves because they just stab you. But even the seed heads are pretty, a pretty yellow little pom-pom, and are decorative in of themselves. But they're also a perennial, comes back every year faithfully, and I can spread the seeds wherever, and they reseed themselves if I just leave them in place. Sweet Williams. Sweet Williams reseed for me like crazy. This is a form of dianthus, very sweet smelling, thus the name. There's a range of pinks, reds, whites, some that are pink and white or red and white. I have a whole patch growing up that came up from seed that I left last summer. They bloom in spring, deadhead them, they'll keep blooming more in the summer. I let mine go to seed because I wanted a big patch of them. And I will also, because there's a huge patch and I don't need that much in that space, I can dig up chunks of them, like I said I did with the larkspur, and transplant them around the garden. And then I have dianthus, not dianthus, but the Sweet Williams all the way around. They come up very easily from seed as well. So if you buy a packet of seeds, get it in the ground now. They love overwintering and coming up on their own directly in garden bed. They're also easy to grow in containers, and then you can put out if that's the way you want to go. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here about flowers that reseed themselves. When they come up in your garden and they thrive, it's because they found a spot they liked. Now, it's one thing I've noticed that they actually do much better than plants that I have started inside and then put outside. Because when they come up, as I said, they've picked their spot. That spot works for them and they love it. And if you planted in a pot and then put it out, it's a spot you picked. And then so it may not do as well. It may do well, but not as well as one that may have reseeded itself. And when there's a whole bunch in one area, usually the strongest one will flourish, the others just kind of die away. So it really works well. I just thin out the ones I don't want to keep, let the strongest ones keep going, and it's all good. But just keep that in mind with flowers that reseed themselves. They've picked their best place in the garden and they will do very well. This goes along with one of my last videos on a low maintenance garden. Because of you not having to plant out, when they're thriving, they're more pest resistant, disease resistant, all of the above, just because they're healthier. So yeah, we left off on Sweet Williams. Yarrow. My yarrow does reseed itself readily. Now I have dwarf ones that are shorter. I have the tall yarrow, the white yarrow. Now some will say yarrow is invasive. Common yarrow may be for you, but it is a native as far as I know here in the United States. So it may be a thug, not necessarily invasive. But the yarrows I have like the Cerise Queen. I had the summer mix, there's a berry mix. There's a wide range of pastel colors, and those all don't seem to be as thuggish as the more common yarrow. So give those a try, and you may be surprised at how well you like them and how well they do. Keep deadheading them in the summer. They will keep on blooming for a very, very long time. And then you can divide the clumps too if you didn't want to start over from seed. And if you don't want them to go to seed, you just keep deadheading and they won't. Foxgloves. Foxgloves are one of my favorites, and the best way to grow them is to let them reseed. And if you're starting from seed, dispersing or casting the seed into your garden in the area you want them to grow and bloom is the best way to go about it. I have found that those did the best for me. They reseeded themselves. Now, when I did the pure white ones, they came up pure white. But the seeds from them, the flowers had cross-pollinated with other foxgloves in my garden, so the return flowers did not come back white or come up white, the ones that came from seed, because of the cross-pollination. But that's okay. All of them were beautiful anyways. I've got a wide range of colors, some unusual combinations, and yes, I just have loved it. Now, I like the pantaloons. They're very different. The pantaloons is a variety. You can find the seeds from those. And to get started with them, do is like I said, if you buy a packet of seed, sow thickly in one area, let them come up, and as they reseed, you can start spreading them around. I will link my blog post and video on how I get the foxgloves in other parts of my garden by scattering the seeds, just how I do it. And it's super easy, and it really can give you, because I've seen people say that they really had no success with foxgloves. Now, number one, it could be their climate. Now, many of these flowers have a range of what they like and what they don't, and it doesn't necessarily mean their zone, because right now we're talking about things coming back from seed, and that's not dependent on the zone primarily. Whether they remain perennial in your garden your zone can have effect on that. But when they come up from seed, it's not a big deal. It's kind of like annuals. And some of these are annuals that reseed themselves and come up, so you don't have to replant. So, foxgloves, yes, again, I will link that video. Coneflower or echinacea, yes, I have had them reseed. Like the foxgloves, when I do the white swan, grow the white swan, and they go to seed, and then I plant those seeds or let them scatter, disperse, or let the birds do it. They don't come up white, the white swan. I may get one or two here and there, but usually when they have crossed with the pinker ones, I'll get a faded pink color that comes up from the flower that comes up. It's kind of insipid, so it's pretty, but not as pretty as the darker pink or the pure white. And a lot of times I'll dig them up, throw them on the back hill, and let them grow up back there, where just basically they are pollinator plants and not something that I have in my garden. Now, I have grown Magnus, which are pretty pink and they have big flowers, and other varieties. Now, I just seeded some, and I can't remember, they weren't the powwow white. There was another one. There's one called Angel something that's very sweetly scented. But echinaceas are another one that will reseed very readily and come up. In fact, I just threw seeds, I just said that, in a raised bed to come up through the winter. And I have 2 white swans growing in another raised bed that I seeded last year and are coming up. I do want to transplant them. That's still on my list to do. Maybe tomorrow I will get to it. So yes, my friends, let's see. I think that's all of them. Oh, wait a minute. Nope. Lupins, yes. Lupins, Russell lupins, are something that you can grow from seed very easily. Now, one thing about, and I may have mentioned this already, I start to lose my place, things that reseed themselves easily are usually ones that you can grow from seed very readily, very easily. And the beauty of that is a package of seeds is so relatively inexpensive compared to buying plants. Now, yes, you get like 25 seeds and you don't want 25 of a certain plant, but you could always plant them up, give some to friends, swap. Maybe they grew something like daisies or whatever, and they didn't want 25 daisies. Kind of maybe, what do I say, team up, and then you can each buy certain seeds and swap out seeds, etc., and really save on your gardening budget. So lupins, yeah, and lupins come in a lot of colors. And yeah, I need to do more lupins because they do really, really well for me. And so far the gophers have left them alone. Shasta daisies. Now, you know I love my crazy daisies. The daisies grow beautifully from seed. The crazy daisies have all these ruffly flowers. All the flowers are different on each plant. They can be short and stubby petals. They can be long drapey petals. They can be frilly and fuzzy and curly petals. Yeah, there's just a wide array. When they reseed, the baby seedlings are not the same as the parent plant, but they will be fun and pretty. Yeah, and fun. And daisies you can divide. I think, yes, I do. I have a video on how to divide daisies so you get exact replica of the plant. In fact, I should do another one. I've got a plant that I need to divide because the flowers of it were so gorgeous and I want to replicate that plant. And it's back on the back hillside in the back lane garden where I did get to walk around and see it, but I would like it up in the entrance garden or in the rose cottage garden or in the secret cottage garden. But daisies are another one of my favorite cottage flowers that perennial reseeds itself very, very readily. And so it's perfect for most gardens. Now, I will say there has been a hybrid that came out. Proven Winners had it out. It was called Daisy May. And they have a banana cream. The Daisy May, now I went ahead and bought one to compare it to my crazy daisies that I grew from seed. And the whole premise behind this hybrid and why it was supposed to be better was that it was supposed to bloom longer. Now I've had it a couple years, and I've had it blooming alongside with my crazy daisies. So far, it has not bloomed longer. And even with deadheading, I did not get a rebloom like I did with some of my crazy daisies. So I can't attest to that. And the plant itself, I got it on clearance. It was like $9 for a good sized plant. But you can get a packet of seeds for less than $5 and get 10 plants or more. So I wouldn't always believe the hype of super hybrid plants as far as that. They don't always perform better. And maybe in someone else's garden they did, but for me they didn't. So I just wanted to let you know that sometimes things is more marketing than it is actual something that is going to grow better for you. So yeah, go ahead and grow some daisies from seed. I hope you can't hear that blower. I don't know why they decide to do this when I am out here. Alrighty, so that was my list. So tips for success. Now, if you want plants to reseed, you need to avoid heavy mulching where you want those seedlings to come up. In fact, if you kind of pull the mulch away where the seeds fall, and then they will germinate and grow better because, of course, you mulch to avoid weeds coming up from seeds. So pulling it away, the mulch. Keep bare soil patches. That comes away with pulling the mulch back. You got to allow the seed pods to develop on your plants and let them fall to the ground or collect them and spread them in other areas. But do let them dry and cure properly before you do that on the plant. So yeah, that goes along with avoid trimming plants too early in the season. Now, if you want reblooms for many of these plants, you do deadhead them. But when you're getting towards the end of your garden season, give them time to develop seed heads and to cure before you get your first frost. So when you go to collect them and scatter them, of course, you want to do it on open soil where maybe you have already amended it and have it ready for the next season. Now you can, like if you have a really harsh winter, you can mulch lightly with leaves or whatever, and make sure when things are warming up in spring, you pull that mulch back, and then those seeds can go ahead and germinate. So if it's dry, when everything is going to seed, you might want to water lightly as they're falling to the ground. Now, a lot of mine fall to the ground, and I have my irrigation system. I have misters set up as well as the drip, because the misters help with the spider mite problem we have, getting moisture into the air because we have very arid conditions. But so I don't necessarily wet them down. A lot of things like my foxgloves and everything, they go to seed. I just let them be in the garden wherever they've fallen, and then, as they sprout, sometimes they'll sprout in the summer. I will dig them up if I don't want them in that area. So I don't have any problem with them coming up, and I don't have to specifically water them in that area. You'd only do it if maybe it was dry. So now, as I said before, and I kind of hinted on it there, how do you keep them in control? With the different plants, like the hollyhocks, you can see when those things are going to seed. Cut them off. So then they won't spread. They won't get spread around your garden and do anything that harms or becomes a thug. The same with the Or I'm thinking baby blue eyes, forget-me-nots. Forget-me-nots, when you pull the plants up when they're done, because they are done and they don't go through the summer, except for the Chinese forget-me-nots. That's a different story. But you can mulch really heavily when you plant other plants in there, and that will suppress the seeds from germinating. And then they are no longer really that big of a problem. Now, if you have where I've never had them spread into other beds or into the lawn, I don't have a lawn, or into the pathway or anything like that, but they're super easy to kill. I basically, a lot of times in areas that have things that come up that I don't want, I weed eat it. And many of these flowers, back when I was working full time with my cleaning business, I had very little time for my garden, but I loved my garden. Many of these plants grew in my garden. I just let them do their thing. What I did to keep my paths clear, I didn't weed. I weed eated it. That was it. That's all I had time for. I have a blog post on, how to clear a path in 5 minutes, and that's basically what I did. It was all weedy. It was a mess. And you wouldn't believe how just weed eating can clean it up and make it enjoyable without having to fuss about pulling out every single weed. Would I have to do it again? Yes, if I watered or if water got into the pathway. But if it was during the height of summer and that area wasn't getting water, I had very little problem with weeds coming up because they just weren't getting any water. But I had the most beautiful cottage garden with all of these flowers coming up wherever they wanted. And they just were beautiful. They would reseed. I would just let them because I didn't have time to go out and deadhead constantly. I would try to do a little bit because in the morning before I left for work, I would go out with my coffee, my clippers, and I would just deadhead here and there. It kept some of them blooming because if you deadhead, it keeps them blooming. If they go to seed, that means they're done and they won't bloom anymore. So I wanted to keep some of them blooming. But I had a gorgeous garden. I will put up a picture of my garden during that time. And I just let go of everything having to be perfect. There was not the, like too much or very much. Shorter plants in front, taller plants in the middle. They just all came up and mixed together. Now I curate a little bit more because I have the time to do so and I want to do so. But back then I didn't, and I still was able to enjoy a beautiful garden. So please do not be afraid. Buy these Pinterest pens or other things that say, don't plant this, it becomes a thug. I will say, check on your state's invasive list that you're not planting anything that is invasive. Now, one thing I did not have on this list that I will mention now was morning glories. There's some states that morning glories are listed as invasive because they do come back so readily from seeds. I have plenty that come back in my garden from seeds. I'm always pulling them out. What is on my neck? Great. Sorry. I'll leave it in. I hope that wasn't too distracting. We'll see what it was on. Anyway, so morning glories, they do come up. I let them come up in areas and climb over arbors and what have you, but I'm pulling a ton out in areas where I don't want them because they put out so many seeds. Now I'm feeling stuff all over me. So I'm going to end this right now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Try planting some of these. Let me know how some of these did for you. I know there's going to be people coming in here saying, whoa, no way am I putting that in my garden because it became so hard to keep out or keep under control. That happens in certain areas. They just love your climate and the things going on there, so they want to just do their thing. But in other areas, they won't. So you don't know until you try unless you have a garden friend and they can tell you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Come on back for the next one where I'll try to share some other garden wisdom that I may have learned over the 40 years I've been gardening. So I'll see you in my next video. Bye. And go on back and watch this video on the 10 things I quit to have a lower maintenance garden. See you next time.